Good morning, everyone. Guys, we're making a plate. Question to think about. And can you think in your life about a particularly good debate that you had with somebody? And what made it good? Or on the contrary, a particularly bad debate you had with somebody, and what made it bad? Yes. Good.
But I don't like having a debate. I mean, they may.
The oldest person we ought to have like 66, but New York, Canada are all other people up there. Send you the link.
Michael, Michael was filling up to those. Yeah, you did the whole night. Stop setting them up.
Let's start hearing from some people. What made it a good debate good or a bad debate bad? Can you recall?
Elliot, this is my husband.
Hello. Hey, takers. Got a mic now. Check this out. Yes, great, Elliot.
Like to have open discussions, and what I've encountered that's a bit unpleasant, especially to get into anything related to politics or what's going on in Israel. People are so very often closed-minded. They don't want to have, if you're on the opposite side of the fence from their position, they don't even want to listen.
Okay, so content, right? There are certain subject matters that just tend to devolve into fierce argument and emotions and yelling and fights, right? So content for sure. I know that in college, there was a sort of rule of if you were rushing for don't talk God, don't talk politics, and don't talk, it definitely wasn't sports. I can't remember what the third one was. Right, religions, politics. Anyway, so right, so content could, some things just lend themselves. Yes, David.
Here, I'm going to speak about God. When I was a graduate student, I volunteered at wearing a red coat, being an usher, all just friends and whatever. So I was very friendly with this one who one day she says to me, "You know, David, you're such a nice guy. It's a shame you're going to hell." Excuse me? And he said, "You don't believe in JC."
Right.
I don't, but here's what I do believe in. And we had a spirited discussion. And I said, all I can say is ask yourself, what kind of God sends nice people to hell? But that ended the discussion, and it also more or less ended the friendship.
Yeah.
And by JC, you were referring to John Coltrane?
Yeah.
Okay, but right, yeah, okay, yeah.
Similar thing to that, when my children were young, my one daughter was friends with this other little girl and I became friendly with her mother. We did a lot of things together. And then one day she told me, I just can't be friends with you anymore because you're going to hell and that would just hurt me so much. And she didn't talk to me for many, many years until more recently, her husband collects stamps like Mike does, and they got together. And so now sometimes we see each other. We're not really friends anymore, but
Right.
Same thing.
Right. So it's interesting, like, and that's not even almost a debate, right? Those are more just statements that are, no, it's good. It's going off of that. But I was thinking, going back to what David said, that there is a curiosity, at least, right? That you said, what kind of, it was said as a rebuttal, but still there's a curiosity. Thing.
I was, well, maybe there's right people in the world, whether you're Christian, Muslim, Jewish, whatever you.
Right. But that makes me think that curiosity is often a helpful tool to diffuse what would otherwise be a heated fighting match, shouting match, right? If you say, like, instead of going to like, I'm not going to give you the rebuttal in a heated way, but say, like, what makes you think that way? Or, like, let's explore that further, because if you actually think that I'm going to hell, then what are the implications of that kind of God? Right? You could say it in a way that then invites, oh, you know what, now I want to either tell you why I think that, how I reconcile it, or maybe it'll prompt me to reevaluate.
I didn't think I'd said it in a terribly, I don't know, negative way, so to speak, but she certainly took it that way.
Right. Do we want to speak?
David, it comes on.
Okay, Stephen, and I just want to say, I want to make sure you're driving safely. So whatever you got to do to drive safe.
I'm driving safely. So first comment is, I'm not sure what my friend Elliot to your right or left said, but I think what he said I disagree with, because I would say that since the Iron Swords occurrence tragedy on October 7th, we are far more united. Both definitely within Israel, absolutely within Israel. I'm not talking about the fringe, people on the fringe, and also in the diaspora in Canada, America, and Europe. I don't know what the Europeans do.
The content we're talking about is not inherently polarizing always. In some cases, it actually is a prompt solidarity or unity. I'm going to pause the discussion really quickly because I promised Murray I would throw it to him for some quick announcements before we begin, and I got caught up and forgot. So I want to throw it to Murray.
Tova and I will not be here the next 2 weeks. And also, Tova has an appointment today, so if some people could help me clean up afterwards, because I have something at 1:30 and deal with that. Okay, thank you very much. Have a great class.
Thank you. It's great because of you guys, and obviously because of everyone who comes. So thank you again to Murray and Tova always for making such incredible, healthy, and delicious meals. You've certainly earned 2 weeks, if not way more. So thank you.
Going to be here is because his daughter's getting married.
Yeah, so Mazel tov, mazel tov. We should sing Od Ishama. But okay, I'm gonna pull up the list. Oh my God. Big mistake. I have to just kidding. Tricky bunch. Yeah.
Reader wraps the up.
No, I know. I'm gonna pull up the source sheet for Zoom. But good. So thank you for sharing a couple of examples of what makes a good debate and what makes a tricky debate. What I want to dive in today is conflict resolution. And I'm bringing you, this is fresh from the Shalom Hartman Institute, because I was just in a conference in New Jersey and got to benefit from incredible teachers over at Hartman. And these are texts you may or may not be familiar with, but it was the way in which they were presented to shed light on productive debate and conflict resolution. This was brought to us by Christine Hayes, who works at Hartman. And so I wanted to share it in her name and bring it to you guys. So even if you're familiar with these texts, or if not, hopefully we'll see them in a new light today. So who would like to dive in? This is from Mishnah. We're going to start with Mishnah before we dive into Midrash. Did anybody want to volunteer to read first? Great.
There was an incident in which two witnesses came to testify about the new moon. And they said, we saw the waning moon in the morning in the east, and that same day we saw the new moon in the evening in the west. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri said, they are false witnesses. However, when they arrived in Yavna, Rabban Gamliel accepted them.
Okay, I'm just going to pause for 1 second, which is that what they saw was astronomically impossible. Without being an expert in astronomy, I can't really explain how, but basically what they saw was not a possibility. And so that's what's prompting Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri to say that they must have been false witnesses. However, Rabban Gamliel accepted them anyway. Rabban Gamliel is the Nasi. He's the head of the Sanhedrin Hagdol, right? The big Sanhedrin, the rabbinic court. He is also he's the great grandson of Rabbi Hillel, right? So he is a huge, if one of the dominating figures. Yes.
Did he accept them because he already knew that mathematically they were correct, even though what they said they saw was wrong?
Good question. So it says before this actually that Rabban Gamliel had like a chart where it depicted all the different phases of the moon and how you can tell. And so he would have the witnesses come and describe and point to what they saw. And then from that, he would be able to know. Ron is asking, is it possible that he actually knew mathematically that they were correct, even though their reasoning was incorrect? Like what they saw could not be possible, and yet they were right anyway? Possibly. But Rabbi Akiva later on is going to give us an explanation that is different. Not that Rabban Gamliel was right, knew that they were right, even though they explained it differently. They're going to say that they were indeed wrong. They were false witnesses, and yet it didn't matter. And Rabban Gamliel was still right in affirming their position. So we'll get there, but it's a good question. So who can we keep reading? That'd be great.
Yeah, sure. What's my place? Oh, and there was another incident in which two witnesses came and said, we saw the new moon at its anticipated time. However, on the following night, it wasn't seen. Nevertheless, Rabban Gamliel accepted their testimony. Rabbi Dosa ben Burkina said, they are false witnesses. How can witnesses testify that a woman gave birth and the next day her belly is between her teeth?
Right. So basically meaning, so basically saying that they saw the new moon one day, but then the next day not. And that doesn't, how could you, that's like saying that on one day you saw that she had given birth, but then the next day she was, fully pregnant, 9 months pregnant again. So how is that possible? Basically another astronomical impossibility. And yet Rabban Gamliel is accepting them. So go ahead.
And Rabbi Yehoshua said to him, I see the logic of your statement. Thereupon Rabban Gamliel sent a message to him. I decree against you that you must appear before me with your staff and with your money on the day on which Yom Kippur occurs, according to your calculation.
Great. So this is a major stakes have just risen immeasurably, right? And this is quite the move on Rabban Gamliel's part. So can somebody explain what is Rabban Gamliel basically saying here?
If you're right, then you're going to be doing you'll be desecrating Yom Kippur with tampering money.
Right. Basically saying that we're going my way with this one. And furthermore, on the day that you believe is actually Yom Kippur, right? The stakes are very high here because based on when you declare the new moon, that's how we count our days and know when our festivals and holidays are going to be, right? So if the new moon is on a different day, that throws off when the Chagim are going to be. And so you wouldn't be observing Yom Kippur on the correct day, right? And that would be, what he is saying is show up on the day that you believe is Yom Kippur with your walking stick and with your money bag, which like Sheila said, is totally desecrating Yom Kippur because you're traveling beyond the Tchum, right? You're carrying Tiltul and you got your money, right? It's a total desecration. So this is very public in nature. It's very dramatic. It is not right in terms of thinking back to the debates that are, like civil or taking a curiosity stance. This is not that, right? This is quite different. This is I am correct. And furthermore, you have to desecrate your position. I am right. Your position is shattered. Okay, keep going.
Rabbi Akiva went and found Rabbi Yehoshua distressed and said to him, I can learn from a verse that everything that Rambam Gamliel did, sanctifying the month, is done, as it is stated. These are the appointed seasons of the Lord, sacred convocations, which you shall proclaim.
Okay, pause real quick. So Rabbi Akiva is trying to comfort Rabbi Yehoshua here. How is he comforting him? Nelson, see your hand.
I wasn't going to talk about that, but he's comforting him because he's saying they're appointed and he's the authority to appoint them. So they were appointed correctly.
Right, because, and then I'll get to what you were going to say, but it says, these are the appointed seasons of the Lord, sacred convocations, which you shall proclaim. Right. So even if they are, even if Rabban Gamliel is incorrect in his calculations, that's actually not when the new moon was, and so that's not when Yom Kippur is. Rabbi Akiva is saying it actually doesn't matter, because here's the scriptural verse from Torah where God is saying, these are the set months that you shall proclaim. Who is you? The Jewish representatives, our leaders, and Rabban Gamliel is our leader. So therefore it's okay, even if he's technically wrong. It's still kosher. Nelson, what were you going to say?
Well, remember, I'm a professional philosopher, retired. And by training, I'm a good debater in philosophical topics. Yeah. And I always wanted to debate with my students, but I realized eventually that I had an advantage. I knew how to do it. I knew the tricks. I'd been over these arguments before. And it was really was not a level playing field. And I think sometimes that's what people are really saying. I don't want to debate with you because I think you're going to trick me. So I'm just not going to debate. I'm right. I don't care what you say.
Interesting. So maybe we force them into a defensiveness if they don't feel safe or like they even have if it's a trap, right? Like I'm not going to buy into this because I'm going to lose and I'm going to be humiliated.
Yeah, but it's not just that. I think that's what a lot of some of the political sides in this country believe.
Right. Okay, good. Thanks.
I share a little different perception of this in terms of unpleasant interactions and people leaving an interaction thinking they're at opposite end from somebody else. They're likely due to the fact that people often bypass each other in terms of how they're using words, how they're using language. People can leave an interaction thinking we now understand each other, and ultimately they're in two separate worlds.
So if I understand you correctly, a lot of it is semantics, right? And if you don't define the terms at the beginning of a debate, then you might actually not be so far apart from each other as you think. But right, I'm sure we've all experienced this, where it's like you get into this heated debate, and then once you actually take a second to say, wait, let me just be clear. By this, I mean that, and then somebody, oh, that's different, right? Because when you say that, I actually think that's what it means. No, that's not right. So often it's just we get ahead of ourselves and we don't take the time to just actually really. So I'm hearing here in both comments like the conditions, right? Conditions are important for a debate as opposed to just like occurring in real life. If we say, okay, let's set the stage for a healthy debate where we're defining our terms. No one is out to trap or trick each other, but that is so rare. That's like having it in a vacuum or having it in it's usually that's not our experience in real life when these debates emerge. Okay, let's dive back to our text here, but we can see that Rabban Gamliel has opted for really aggression here, right? It's really an aggressive move to make Rabbi Yehoshua do this. Rabbi Akiva comes to comfort him that actually, even if Rabban Gamliel isn't technically right, he still has halachic footing to stand on. So don't feel so bad like you're now liable for karet, right? For excommunication, for his soul being cut off, right? It says, anybody who desecrates Yom Kippur, right? It's karet is the punishment, that your soul is cut off from your people. It's a big deal. But Akiva said, don't worry, you'll be okay because of this. Let's keep going.
Whether or not you have proclaimed them at their proper time, I have only these festivals. Rabbi Yehoshua then came to Rabbi Dosa ben Arkinas, who said to him, if we come to debate the court of Rabban Gamliel, we must debate every court that has stood from the days of Moses until now. Thereupon, Rabbi Yehoshua took his staff and his money in his hand and went to Yabna to Rabban Gamliel on the day on which Yom Kippur occurred, according to his own calculation. Rabban Gamliel stood up and kissed him on his head, said to him, come in peace, my teacher and my student. You are my teacher in wisdom, and you are my student, as you accepted my statement.
Okay, so there are a couple things happening here. One is this idea that if we debate the court of Rabban Gamliel, we must debate every court that has stood from the days of Moses until now. Simply put, that just the idea of Masorah, right? We have a precedent, we have a tradition that is passed down from the hands from Moses, to Joshua, and down to the 70 elders, right? And there's actually more text here that's explaining the Gemara, saying because it doesn't name who the 70 elders are, it just says the 70 elders. Therefore, basically, like this is including Rabban Gamliel, and so it's drawing this line of authoritative connection back to Moses. So we can't just, if we're chipping away at Gamliel, really, the whole structure falls apart here. That goes back to Moses. So therefore, Rabbi Joshua he concedes and he capitulates. He does it, right? He takes his staff and his money on the day that he knows is Yom Kippur by his calculation, but he is going by Rabbi Gamliel. Now, there's two ways to read this ending. One is kind of heartwarming and sweet. Rabban Gamliel stood and kissed his head. Come in peace, my teacher and my student, right? This is Gamliel referring to somebody who is still a gadol, still one of the great sages of his generation, but lower in status than Gamliel, and he's calling him my teacher. So that's huge, right? Saying, in wisdom, you're superior than me even, right? But my student, because you've listened, you have respected my authority. So two ways. One is nice and heartwarming, but this teacher that I learned this from, Christine Hayes, when she was building her case here, was saying that actually she reads it the other way, which is it's not just it's more of a show. This is still performative on Rabban Gamliel's part, that it's saying now, in addition to showing to the whole assembly that he is right and has the power, he's now showing to everybody how magnanimous he is. Like, look how, so still there's sort of a show here. So two ways to read it. And I don't want to be unfair to Rabban Gamliel, but for the sake of dissecting how we approach debates, I'm going to stick with that second reading for now, and I'll explain why. David?
I think it's interesting that it ends this way, as opposed to trying to draw any conclusion about the reality that you can't have people observing Yom Kippur on different days.
Right.
That would seem to be, in some sense, the heart of it. So then who has the ultimate authority to decide which day, even if they're technically wrong, because you can only have it on one day. And interestingly, they don't go there. They go at either this show or at this idea of literal magnanimity.
Right. So to take Rabban Gamliel's side, or to it would be a chaos if everybody observed based on when they calculate instead of one generally accepted time for us to be, that's halakha, right? Ultimately, you need an answer, and Gemara and Talmud is much more concerned with the debate and often doesn't give us a resolved answer, right? Sometimes that's with teku, means it's unresolved, we don't know, but that's okay, because really it's more about the process than the destination, right? The journey, not the destination. But in terms of halakha, halakha say at least, like, what do we do? At the end of the day, tell us what we're supposed to do. You need a definitive answer that we can hold by, even if we preserve the minority opinions. right? We at the end of the day, what are we going to do as a unified Jewish community? So very important. And Rabban Gamliel certainly then maybe is justified in being so dramatic here, because he's saying we need to be a united front. We can't have a derision. Yeah.
It seems to me that we're always looking at it both sides. In other words, I look at you and say you're handsome. Sarah looks at you and says he's not so handsome. Hair is too curly.
Okay, let's stop this here.
Get the same thing and see it differently. It's got beauty to life, really.
Right.
Because
Right.
it would be very dull. And this is the same thing. I mean, I'm taken by this, and I'm ashamed to say it, but I see such negativity in some of these rabbis. Yeah, the way they do things. And yeah, but that's the way, and it may be more of a case of a translation, but that's the way they did things. That, you know, first of all, they didn't get to write everything down. Or if they wrote it, I don't know if they wrote everything down. They were writing them, but still, it's
right. But I love that the importance of subjectivity and how often that is lost in debate, right? Usually there is a sense that there is one objectively correct answer here, and we're fighting to get to what that is. And so it's very rare that we hold on to this notion that, well, you know what, that's how you see it. Right. Yeah, right. Right. No, in our tradition, it says Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim Chaim, right? These and those are the words of the living God. And that's referring to the Hillel Shammai debates, right? And then we're supposed to create for ourselves a heart of many rooms that holds the position of both Hillel and Shammai, right? These and these can be true. Yes, let's go David and then Larry, yeah.
So, and that's kind of where the part of what I'm getting to, which is that we could agree to disagree about how long you have to wait between meat and milk, or some other point of that kind, because we still agree on the basic point, which is we're separating milk and meat. On the other hand, we can't really disagree about what day is Yom Kippur. That would be chaos.
Right. So there are some arguments where there's more room for deferring opinions, or you do, you know, it's a minhag, right? It's the custom of the place, and that has halakhic value and authority too. That's important, what people do. But that minhag usually comes to play with things that are less important than something like when is Yom Kippur, right? So there's less room for, okay, yeah, you see it that way, I see it that way. That's good. There's room enough for both. Not on everything, right? Sometimes we need to have an answer. Right. Okay, good. Larry?
I'm a little bit confused as to actually what takes place at the very end when Rabbi Yehoshua actually goes to Gamliel. In other words, is he actually going on the day he still feels but he still takes everything else? So then is that the day? Is that not the day? I'm still not understanding what exactly happened. So why about Gamliel saying that, okay, you took the statement, you're still worthy. He's not degrading him in any way, even though he's saying you're still wrong. And why would, if that's in other words, Gamliel is making Yehoshua sort of break the halakha, because that's the day he feels it is, yet he's still coming with the staff and the money. So what is the day? And I'm not quite understanding.
Right. No, I think it was the last bit of what you said, that this is the day that Rabbi Yehoshua believes is Yom Kippur, but which Rabban Gamliel believes is not Yom Kippur, and has ruled that it's not Yom Kippur because he affirmed the witnesses who said that the new moon is then. So therefore, this day is just a regular day, right? According to Rabban Gamliel, but to Rabbi Yehoshua, right, who is going by a different calculation of the moon, that this is actually Yom Kippur, he is forced to break it. But it's only in his mind, because the court has ruled that Rabban Gamliel has ruled that this is not Yom Kippur. So what's happening at the end is Rabbi Yehoshua is capitulating to the authority, to to Rabban Gamliel and breaking Yom Kippur for him, but it's not actually Yom Kippur, so it's okay. Does that make sense?
He's sort of ceding his opinion, saying that because I came with this, I'm realizing mine is wrong.
Well, he may not be realized he still might believe that he is correct, but he has to suppress that because the rule is the rule.
He doesn't have the authority.
Yeah. If Rabbi Hal ruled that that I'm trying to think of a point. Yeah.
They got dangerous.
Here's one. Okay, here's one. Yeah. No, yeah, it is. Yeah, like Zoom, right? Let's say that I was more machmir. I was more strict with my Shabbat observance, which was such that I cannot use technology on Shabbat, right? I can't be mic'd. I can't be recorded on Zoom. But Rabbi Hal, who is Mara Da'atra, he is the authority of this domain. He ruled through his, halachic genius, which I'm not saying, I'm telling you, I'm being sincere. This is how I am coming at the halakha. If you are going to be a rabbi at this shul, you have to obey my halakha. Then I would be in a position where I would be on Zoom on Shabbat, even if in my heart of hearts I didn't feel it was halachically kosher. I am ceding to the authority of this opinion I deeply respect. So I think that's what Rabbi Yehoshua is doing here. But raise the stakes because it's Yom Kippur.
So God, which is an actual faith.
Yeah.
This happens regularly in the synagogue, where there's at a certain point. I mean, like with the not intermarriages, but gay marriages and things like that, where there is a disagreement. There, you're dealing with, okay, then you just can't work here. This is not what we do.
Right, he doesn't have an out the way I would in the technology situation, right? I say, well, I'm sorry, my values don't align with those of B'nai Shur, and I have to go somewhere else. But this is different. He has no place to go, right? This is you can't just right. Good. Larry, David, and then Jerry, and then I want to keep going.
Comparing this in modern times, as you were saying, sort of like the Council of Conservative Rabbis come out with rulings, things, and you sort of, because somebody is a rabbi at a conservative shul, they may not personally agree with something, but they have to agree with it because the authority lies within the council.
Right.
Yeah, kind of similar.
Right. It's sort of swallowing your pride and saying, you know what, my teachers have made a ruling and I respect that, even if I don't agree. Yeah.
The other thing that I think is interesting about the story is that this isn't really a case where the story says one rabbi for these reasons one way and one rabbi for that reason rules the other way. What it seems to be saying is the rabbi who has any reason and authority behind him, who may be right technically, the other rabbi who's senior to him, the Ad Beit Din, if you will, has no basis at all. Just accepted the witnesses, even though the witnesses are clearly spouting nonsense.
Good.
And we still have to respect the opinion of the Ad Beit Din.
Good. So I'm glad that you elevated that, and we're going to hold on to that because we're going to see that come into play in our next text. But what are we used to in Talmud is the back and forth and proof text against proof text. But here, Rabban Gamliel is falling back on his authority and not giving his rationale, his proof text for what supports his opinion, because he doesn't have to, right? He's just using his authority to stamp out the opposition, right? Which again factors into this discussion on what makes for healthy debate and what makes for unhealthy debate, right? Are we citing our sources and allowing us to actually interact with and see how did you get there, and let's actually engage with the primary sources or how you're arriving at your argument, or is this just sort of a unilateral what I say goes without an ability to engage? Go ahead. Yeah.
To me, this seems like it could be a scene from The Godfather. He's kissing the head. But someday. No, it's just a raw power struggle is
Yeah.
what it is. And he who is in charge is in charge, and that's the end of it. So.
Should we take a vote and see if who wants Jerry to read the whole source again in a Marlon Brando impression? Let's go Nelson, and then I do want to move on to the next text.
Well, I had a dispute with my from son, and it was over this kind of an issue. And he consulted one of his rabbis who said, you have to honor your parents. And so he accepted her word.
Nice, nice.
But I think of that as well. I think people have trouble when their from kids come to eat dinner and they don't like the level of kashrut.
Right.
And maybe they should talk to, maybe the kids should talk to their senior rabbis and get an opinion on it.
Yes. You're making me think of somebody once said that kashrut used to be an excuse for Jews to eat together, and now it's an excuse for Jews not to. Right.
It's terrible.
It's terrible. It's terrible. No, it's a terribly sad thing. Sheila, but then I really do want to move on.
But after school, if you're told, I'll be more specific. What's my kid? A conservative rabbi's child was told not to listen to her father's Kiddush on that Friday night because he was not observant enough. And her father was very traditional conservative.
Right.
I don't have it do a lot of things,
right.
But because he's in a conservative school, he's hateful.
Right. Yeah.
He was reprimanded by the head.
Right.
When it's what was the
Yeah. Right. This is where for me, and not everybody may feel comfortable making this step, but I like to step back and say, like, what do I think is the intention behind this law, or the God that I believe in? What does that God truly want in this situation? And some people are not comfortable making that step because it's what is written is what is, and it's a more strict. Yeah, but I think it always is helpful to take a step back. And so I want to say one more thing here, which is that Rabban Gamliel isn't really going for debate, which I heard somebody say here, right? Consensus is not necessarily his goal here, right? It seems conflict is his goal. And it seems that he has defined Rabbi Yeshua as a threat, which is what Jerry was saying about sort of Godfather power struggle going on here, that this is a threat. I need to squash this threat. I need to do this publicly, right? So it goes back to what is actually the intention behind this? Is there actually, in this debate, quote unquote, are we actually trying to arrive at consensus and understanding? Or are we just trying to squash one another? Is this really about power, or is this really about sort of erasing the other? So let's move on to our next text. Who would like to read? Now we're getting to Midrash. This is from Talmud, and this is actually Midrash Halakha. So it's about law. Jerry, go ahead, and you don't have to do Brenda, but if you want to.
You came before Rabbi Yehoshua. The student said to him, "Is the evening prayer optional or obligatory?" Rabbi Yehoshua said to him, "Optional." The same student came before Rabban Gamliel and said to him, "Is the evening prayer optional or obligatory?" Rabban Gamliel said to him, "Obligatory." The student said to Rabban Gamliel, "But didn't Rabbi Yehoshua tell me that the evening prayer is optional?" Rabban Gamliel said to the student, "Wait until the masters of the shields enter the study hall."
Okay, who do you think the masters of the shields are?
Sounds like Marvel characters.
Yeah, it's the Avengers. Yeah, it's the rabbis, because in the war of Torah and debate and understanding, they are warriors. So it's a nice way. Nobody calls us that, and it hurts me. So the masters of the shields enter the study. So that's the rabbis. Go ahead.
Masters of the shield enter. The questionnaire is put before everyone present and asked, "Is the evening prayer optional or obligatory?" Rabban Gamliel said to him, "Obligatory." Rabban Gamliel said to the sages, "Is there any person who disputes this matter?" Rabbi Yoshua said to him, "No, Rabbi Gamliel," said to Rabbi Yoshua.
Oh, just no, right? Nope, not me. I didn't say anything, not me, right?
Yoshua, but was it not in your name that they told me that the evening prayer is optional? Rabbi Gamliel said to Rabbi Yoshua, stand on your feet and they will testify against you. Rabbi Yoshua stood on his feet and said, if I were alive and the students were dead, the living can contradict the dead. If I am alive and he is alive, how can the living contradict the living?
Basically saying that I have no deniability here, right? Maybe if the student who is accusing me were dead, then it's my word against someone who is no longer here. But he is here accusing me and I can't deny. Is just, okay, so keep going.
Lecturing and Yeshua, all the while was standing on his feet, until all of the people began murmuring and said to Hutzpit, the disseminator, stop.
Right, so that's the person who is like translating the microphone, basically. The microphone to Rabbi Gamliel, who is studying and expounding, and Rabbi Yehoshua is, this is sort of a humiliating public, it's kind of a punishment. He has to stand this whole time, right? Everybody else is allowed to sit, he's standing. So, but everybody there feels this is unfair, and so they tell the microphone basically stop, right? This can't go on as it is, keep going.
Stop, and he stopped. They said, how long will Rabbi Gamliel continue afflicting him? Last year on Rosh Hashanah, he afflicted him.
Right, we just read that one, right? We know that story.
Was it Yom Kippur?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. But I think it was, this is referring to Rosh Hashanah time, because it's when you're
have to know what the new moon is.
Right. So it was, Rabbi Yoshua was still desecrating Yom Kippur, but it was because when did we declare the new moon? And Rosh Hashanah is the new moon, it's the new year. Yeah. Keep going.
The last year on Rosh Hashanah, he looked at it. Regarding the first book in the instance of God, he afflicted it.
We didn't read that one, but there was another example, right? And then
here too he is afflicting him. Let us remove him from his position. It was taught that day they dismissed the guard at the door and permission was granted to the students to enter. As we learned in the mission, on that day, Yehuda the Ammonite convert came before the students in the study hall, and he said to them, what is my legal status in terms of entering into the congregation?
Great, I'm going to pause this for just one moment. So there was just one thing that happened that kind of came and went, which is that the bouncer outside the Beit Midrash was dismissed once they removed Rabban Gamliel, because Rabban Gamliel was super selective as to who could enter the Beit Midrash, and his criteria was somebody whose insides matched their outsides, which is a wonderful thing, but maybe hard to prove. And anyway, so a lot of people were left out of the Beit Midrash under Rabban Gamliel's tenure, but once he was removed, the doors were open to more people, which I included in this and didn't cut from this because I think it's pertinent to our discussion on debate, which is sort of, are you closing off the study halls from more voices and more thought, which, limiting or control who has access to the material, or are you, opening your doors and saying, let us reason together. We can benefit from all different, voices. But again, you can make Rabban Gamliel's case that no, this is an elite institution of learning, and we need to have criteria. So anyway, so now we're getting another example of what's going to be a debate between Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Yehoshua, and we're going to see what David pointed out come back into play, which is notice how Rabban Gamliel's argument style of argumentation and debate changes now that his position has changed. So go ahead.
Rabban Gamliel said to him, you are forbidden to enter into the congregation.
Meaning you can't marry one of ours, because he's going to, well, you'll see what happens. But anyway, he's saying you cannot marry a Jew. An Ammonite cannot marry a Jewish person. Okay, keep going.
Rabbi Yoshua said to him, you are permitted to enter into the congregation. Rabban Gamliel said to Rabbi, wasn't it already stated an Ammonite and a Moabite shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord.
This is coming from Deuteronomy, and this is going back to rivalry and war and between these peoples and the ancient Israelites, right? So as punishment, they're never to enter into our community. What, of course, is the prime example of Ruth, right? Ruth, who is a Moabitess, right? And some rabbis say, well, she's a Moabitess. The Torah says no Moabite, so we're okay here, right? But others read it differently. Yeah, so that is one way that they do it. But other ways of doing it, saying is that, well, well, you'll see how Rabbi Yoshua does it.
So Rabbi Yeshua said ago, did Amnon and Moab in their places? Already came and scrambled all the nations, as it is stated. I removed the bounds of the peoples and have robbed their treasures and exiled their vast population.
Great. So what Rabbi Yehoshua here is saying is that Assyria came and scrambled up the nations, right? He exiled the peoples. We don't know that this Moabite who is coming, or that I think is an Ammonite, this Ammonite who's coming and asking to join our community, we don't actually know that he is pure Ammonite, because the Sennacherib came and muddled the waters here. Everything is, nobody, they're not just, it's not clear whose lineage is traced back to where. And then he's going to use a halachic principle to say that we can't assume if somebody, he's going to say that if we get like one person from an unknown, like maybe he's an Ammonite, maybe not, because he comes to this region that has mixed. But if the majority is not Ammonite, we assume that he is not an Ammonite, because we're going to go with the majority, right? If one member of a population comes to us and we don't know this person's identity, we're going to assume halachically, we say that this person belongs to the identity of the majority. And in this case, we're assuming that the majority is not pure Ammonite, because Sennacherib came and mixed them all up. So that's how Rabbi Yehoshua is saying, actually, it's okay for the Ammonite to join, to marry into our community.
Of course, in this day, they would do a DNA search.
They didn't have a DNA search, right?
It's not so particularly poignant, because the 10 lost tribes are lost because the Assyrians destroyed them as a viable ongoing entity. They didn't remember themselves any more than anybody else he mixed up, which was Assyrian policy, because Assyrian hedge money is much better established if nobody remembers who they are, other than a vassal of, or literally subject to Assyria.
That's great. So maybe it was also part of the strategy, political strategy, to erase identity.
Unlike the Babylonians, but that's another subject.
Great, thank you. But keep that theme too about erasing identity, because in part of our debate strategy, that is a particularly aggressive step, but we're seeing that. We're going to come back to that, but let's finish this. Okay, Ron, then we're going to finish.
Going to the same way of thinking here is, we might not be the people that actually came out of Egypt for the same reason.
Interesting. So I thought, when this is usually applied to us, it's with the Kohen status, right? That it's hard to know who is actually a Kohen, because it's been,
have a specific DNA. So
right. So then, but now there's a right. It goes back to, you can test and be more sure, but you could argue that because the line, there's also about who a Kohen can marry. So it's just hard to prove that, even if you know the genes, that it's still like, if they married out, then that would have disqualified, or they married a convert, right? There's certain laws and rules that you can't. So therefore your status is safek, it's in doubt. And so that's why some communities don't do the Kohen gets the first aliyah, because you just can't know. But you're saying that, what if we can't really know about who came out of Egypt?
We don't know. Well, besides the fact that there's no proof that it ever happened.
Sure.
But I mean, assuming that it happened, for the same reason, we assimilated with all kinds of people.
Right. Right. So you could, if you took it to an extreme, you could say, well, who knows anybody's real connection to anything, right?
On the other hand, a Jew by choice is the Ben or Bat Abraham Visara, because
you forget about everything that happened.
Literally the case, figuratively or spiritually, they are just as Jewish as anyone else.
Right. You were also at Sinai.
And also have, exactly, in the same way that my people came from Eastern Europe way after George Washington was president, But the history of our country is still my history.
Right, good, good. Yes, and then
But I don't like thinking about it that way because that makes me think of Adolf Hitler and how it was
German bloodline purity.
just our blood.
Right.
That made us Jewish. And so even if your family hadn't practiced Judaism for centuries, you were still Jewish and you needed to be killed. So.
Right. Right. Well, so that is a larger question of identity, right? What makes you something? Is it a pure bloodline that you can prove is uncorrupted through the ages, or is it a spiritual connection, an intellectual connection? Is it right? Identity is much more complicated than, can you prove a pure uncorrupted bloodline to say it from the stomach? Yes. Good. Okay, let's finish this text.
Anything apart from a group, parts from the majority.
Right, that's the halachic concept we were talking about.
Gamaliel said to Rabbi Yoshua, but wasn't it already stated? But afterwards I will bring back the captivity of the children of Ammon, says the Lord.
Right. So Rabban Gamaliel's rebuttal is, okay, yeah, maybe you're right that Sennacherib came and mixed up the nations, but don't we have this prophecy from Jeremiah that God says, but I will bring back the captivity of the children of Ammon. So God is saying, I will bring them back. So therefore, Rabban Gamaliel he's saying, I am still right in saying that he cannot marry into our group because God restored that people. Keep going.
And they returned to their land. Rabbi Yoshua said to Rabban Gamaliel, that is no proof. Wasn't it already stated? And I will turn the captivity of my people Israel, and they have not yet returned.
Right. They're speaking in exile, right? So Rabbi Yoshua is saying, you can't just use a proof that God said, I will restore the Ammonites, because God also said that God would restore the Israelites, and we have not yet been restored. So keep going.
They immediately permitted him to enter the congregation. Rabban Gamaliel said to himself, since this is the situation, go and defeat Yoshua.
Great. So much different outcome here, right? But what are we noticing is the difference in the style of their debate now that Rabban Gamaliel has been removed from office.
Yeah.
It's gentler, perhaps, but it's also
more liberal.
What kind of
Compromising.
maybe compromising,
Bringing sources because they're more equal-footed.
Yes. Now that they are on equal footing, this is more of a Talmudic debate that you recognize in the language of the Talmud, which is proof text against proof text. Right now we're citing sources. Now we're bringing our citations and actually having a debate where we're trying to reach a consensus. This is not just using power to stamp out a position, right? This is now, okay, now let's actually arrive at something based on, and there's a willingness to be wrong, right? Oh, you know what? You just proved my point. You disproved my point. You actually think you're correct, right? That happened through a much more civil, healthier debate. That because the intentions were different here, because the positions were not equal. Before we move on to this final text, I just want to mention that the context for which this session was taught during this conference was what is going on college campuses, right? And she said, I'm going to spend a lot less time on what's actually going on college campuses and a lot more time with Gemara, which is the same thing I've opted for here. But what she was saying is, I think what we're learning from our tradition, from our sources, is resonant with what's going on college campuses, which if you look at Rabban Gamliel's tactics here, right, you sort of have a 1, 2, 3 punch, right? And punch number 1 is taking control over Rabbi Yehoshua's narrative. Right, at one point, Rabbi Yehoshua is actually silenced, right? Because he's not allowed to, he doesn't want to disagree with Rabban Gamliel in public and all that. So sort of taking control over the narrative instead of letting Rabbi Yehoshua really honestly present his case and take ownership of his own story. There's sort of a co-opting and like I am actually defining. I'm saying what you are, right? Which we can with the Zionism vitriol going on campuses, which is this is what you are, right? This is what a Zionist is. This is what an Israeli is. This is what a Jewish person is, right? So that's step 1 is the sort of I am not allowing you to have your control over your own narrative. I am taking control over your narrative. Then step number 2 is instrumentalization, which is I am now going to use you not as a human being as an end in itself, but as a means to prove my point, right? I'm not actually concerned with relationship. I'm actually concerned with building consensus. You are now a stand-in for this terrible thing that I'm now going to use as a platform to make my case, right? So there's a using of the other person, which you can see Rabban Gamliel doing with Rabbi Yehoshua, right? He uses him as a public, pillory device, right? It's sort of not respecting his individual humanity. And then step three is shaming. Right, then you can see this public shaming that happens to Rabbi Yehoshua, where he's made to be this, object of shaming. And so I think those are the three steps that we're seeing Rabban Gamliel use, and I think it's three steps that we're seeing happening in real time on college campuses, and we know that this is why it is such an unhealthy atmosphere. That it really isn't, the aim isn't consensus or greater understanding, as it should be in any liberal institution of learning, right? Let's bring our sources, let's have a civil conversation, a discussion where we're actually trying to, and it doesn't mean it's peace, like it can still be heated. This is emotional stuff, and this is, but if you are instrumentalizing, if you are not letting them have control over, everyone has control over their own narratives, but you're taking control over it, and then you're shaming, there is no way that we're going to actually reach any sort of healthy debate or consensus. So I want to let's round off with our final text, and then we'll use the remaining time for reflections and final thoughts. Who wants to take us? So great. This is now giving us. This is from the Bavli, another midrash. This is more agadic, more narrative and structure, and it's giving us the alternative. What then creates healthy debate? Go ahead.
Reish Lakish died. Rabbi Yochanan was sorely pained over losing him. The rabbi said, "Who will go to calm Rabbi Yochanan's mind and comfort him over his loss?"
I'm just going to pause real quick, which is it's not just a friend. They're definitely friends, but they are bar pluta. They are sparring partners. These are two that would argue and go at it in the Beit Midrash.
They said, "Let Rabbi Eliezer ben Pendat go, as his statements are sharp." Rabbi Eliezer ben Pendat went and sat before Rabbi Yochanan with regard to every matter that Rabbi Yochanan would say. Rabbi Eliezer ben Pendat would say to him, "There is a ruling which is taught in a Bereta that supports your opinion." Rabbi Yochanan said to him, "Are you comparable to the son of Lachish? In my discussions with the son of Lachish, when I would state a matter, he would raise 24 difficulties to disprove my claim, and I would answer him with 24 answers, and the halakha by itself would become broadened and clarified. And yet you say to me, there's a ruling which is taught in a Bereta that supports your opinion. Do I not know? And saying, where are you? Excuse me, do I not know that what I say is good? Rabbi Yochanan went around rending his clothes, weeping and saying, "Where are you, son of Lachish? Where are you, son of Lachish?" Rabbi Yochanan screamed until his mind was taken from him.
Maybe basically went crazy.
Okay. Yeah. Rabbis prayed and requested for God to have mercy on him and take his soul. And Rabbi Yochanan died.
My God.
Yeah, very sad ending. Very sad ending. But what really like gives me the shivers when I read this is, where are you, son of Lachish? Where are you, son of Lachish? Right? And looking at the situation today on campuses, it's like, where is that kind of partnership in learning? Right? Where we're not just trying to agree with one another. That's not what college is about, right? You want argument, you want healthy debate, but you want healthy debate. And where is that rare form of healthy debate where I'm not looking for somebody to just support me, right? And it's funny because I identify here as Rabbi Eliezer ben Pendat. I think often that is the position I take in debate. It was like, oh, that what you said is very good. And it's making me think of this source, which is bolstering your point. And I think, oh, that's good of me. I'm being a supporter, which I want to be. And I love Rabbi Yochanan's reaction, which is like, I don't need you. What? I know that what I'm saying is good. You're not offering me anything here.
I'm laughing because when I was in college, I was taking a class and I would say something controversial and step back and listen to everybody fight.
Yes.
So you were just right.
I actually think one of the things about this is that these rabbis who are sending this representative of them, if you will, to comfort Rob Yochanan, don't seem to really know him. Because what he wants is the spirited debate he had with Reish Lakish, and nobody's giving him that.
Right.
And he ends up going crazy and dying.
Right. He's misunderstood. He's misunderstood. He's misunderstood. So I just want to end with one point that really rang home for me from this session that was taught, which is differences and disagreements are best when we engage with the best version of our opponent. Right?
Yeah.
We have nothing to gain from an easily vanquished opponent, which is so counter to the way we go about debates today, right? So often it's ridiculing the other. It's, this is not, don't even give this any mind. This is ridiculous. This doesn't require our engagement or attention. And that's often how debates go today, right? It's a discrediting, it's a taking control of the other person's narrative, it's a belittling. But what do we have to gain from that? As opposed to engaging with the best version of your opponent, saying, you know what? My opponent actually brings up a really good point. I'm going to attempt to best it, but I'm going to play at the top of my level because I'm going to assume that they are playing at the top of their level, right? And then halakha expands as a result. So that's my blessing for us all, which is so hard to do. And I can't say that it's much, I mean, it's much easier said than done, but how can we go about in times where conversations can so easily devolve into vitriolic debate and screaming, to actually trying to engage with the best version of our opponent and trying to reach consensus and learn and grow as a result of healthy disagreement.
Debates. They are ignorant and they are
right. So that's the question. Right.
Something like that.
No, it's a great question, right? How do you debate? You have to assume that you're dealing with a good actor and not a bad actor here, right? Somebody who just wants to, who actually is open to this as well. And that's why it's so rare. So I'm not claiming that this is the answer to our problem and this will solve it, but I hope it offers a bit of more framing as how we can understand and engage with the current situation. But no, it's much more difficult in practice because it requires people who are actually on the same page in terms of open to, right? And that's why, where are you, right? Where are you, Reish Lakish? Right? That's the question it ends on.
You know, Rabbi, that brings to mind, it's called The Art of Debate.
Right.
And sometimes I'll watch an old movie or even a current one, and it seems that many times the British maintain that when there is a debate in a British movie, it's done with regard for the other person. And we debase it here in America.
Right.
It just becomes, you want to embarrass the person.
Right.
You know, which is like in Judaism, that's
like
no, that is like murder. You know, and so you forget when you see the art of debate in its real form done the right way, that how damaging it is to do it the wrong way.
Absolutely.
When it comes to Kentucky Derby, the owners are putting their very best horses. That's what they're against. Doesn't pay for the put in a song.
Right. Right. What is it? Yeah. Right.
Quality of the horse doing.
Right. Better for everyone that way. Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone, as always. Thank you, Rukia. Let's stay and help clean if able. And the bowls, the plates, the food scraps can be composted. Plasticware goes in the garbage. No, take them. If you want to take them, take them. If not, leave them and I'll collect them. Yes. Yeah.
Not even about